people's history. Day by day, a story on the wall, a reminder.
The ground beneath our feet is a living web threaded with fungal networks that connect, regenerate, and recycle living matter, supporting all of life on Earth. Dive into January's Otherworldly Underworld with photos by Barry Webb. Reverend Dr. Pauli Murray played a role in virtually every movement for social justice in the latter half of the 20th century, yet was often relegated to the sidelines of the causes she fought for. Adri Norris's portrait offers a glimpse of her remarkable life. Women and their allies are fighting the powerful fight of sisterhood in turning back the forces of church and state determined to keep male supremacy in place. Equity and equality for women shine through in Hanifa Abdul Hamid's March illustration. The persistence, creativity, vision, and community building led by Peace Calendar founder Dick Cool is celebrated in April and honors his 50-plus years of anti-war and social justice activism. Let's carry it on. Recent auto workers' victories signal a resurgent U.S. labor movement, one that is delivering for workers and retirees and holds the potential to spur organizing across other sectors. May's photo by Jim West highlights the power of unions. With the forces of reaction and repression on the offensive, it's vital that LGBTQ++ activists and allies fight back at all levels, local, state, and federal. June's powerful art by Alex Aldabri speaks to the bravest thing you can be, yourself. Record levels of global migration are fueled by immense human suffering and call us to creative and compassionate action to confront nativism and racism. We are one human family. We're in the same boat, as Fatina Ramos aptly conveys in her July mixed media piece. Humans once understood themselves to be part of a living planet. Can we imagine and recreate a world where humans leave a green handprint rather than a carbon footprint? Lose yourself in Rafael Lopez's serene image, Madre Tierra, Mother Earth is calling. September is back to school month for many. Although great progress has been made to reduce juvenile confinement in recent decades, more remains to be done, particularly for Black and Indigenous youth, as depicted in Kate DiCiccio's piece. Think education, not incarceration. The mass destruction and death in Gaza, so vivid on screens across the globe, have been traumatic, as was the brutal Hamas attack of October 7, 2023. Bold action for justice, healing, and reconciliation is required, as shown in October's artwork by Shahzad Raj. Let there be peace and freedom for Palestine. Colonizers the world over have sought to disrupt the transmission of traditional indigenous knowledge from generation to generation. Isay Robledo Gonzalez's tender illustration shows the way that women are often at the forefront of resistance and cultural resilience. It offers grounding during this tumultuous time. December's free-form labyrinth, created by Laura Reeder, is an invitation to explore your particular place on this amazing planet. Rebecca Solnit says, "Walking is how the body measures itself against the earth."
So one of the things that I think is so important is that we feel and experience what is coming at us, that we not try to wall ourselves off, not try to pretend it's not happening. So wondered if I would invite people out, those of you who are joining us, what are some of the feelings that you've been experiencing in these past couple of weeks since the election? Just feel free to yell it out. Grief. Fear. But shame. Division. Anger. Despair. Relief? Okay. So I've experienced all those emotions as well, and again, feel like it's important for us to feel them. And like most things in life, although I was taught, and I think many of us were taught about life kind of heading in lines, right? It really goes in cycles and spirals. And that's true with our feelings as well. There are going to be times where we feel deeply despairing and hopeless about what we can do, how we can protect our neighbors who are particularly vulnerable, whether they're trans young people who are worried that that treatments that they've been undergoing to reclaim the bodies and selves that they identify with will be stopped, or they'll be humiliated in their classrooms or schools or communities, or immigrants that we know who face the possibility of being arrested and deported, or people who aren't immigrants at all but look like some that some may think of as immigrants are arrested and potentially deported. So, but I think it's really important, particularly around the despair and the deep fear, that we find ways not to sink into that, to experience it, to let it in, to not wall it off, but to recognize that the folks who want to lift up greed and hatred and division, they would like nothing more than those of us who want to act out of love and compassion to feel despair and hopelessness. So it's part of our responsibility to not get stuck there, but to move through it. And as part of that, we need to care for ourselves and one another. Right? Both the people that we know, the people in our families, in our communities, in our schools, in our workplaces, but also more broadly, right? And I know that Plymouth has always been a congregation that has both wanted to be a caring, loving place here among the people who are part of the congregation, but also to welcome others, whether it's feeding people who are hungry, many years ago providing daycare for families who needed that, helping refugees and others who are threatened with legal challenges. So that's a key piece of what we need to do. And I know for me, as someone who has done this work for many, many years, there's times when I need to step back a little more and be a little less involved and do a little more to take care of myself, to spend more time outside in the natural world, to be digging in my garden, to be walking my dog and doing the things that feed my spirit. Because one of the dangers in a moment like this is that we feel like we need to do everything right now. Everything is a crisis, and the information environment in which we live is doing that, right? If you watch the news, it's not just what they're telling you, but there's this stuff scrolling underneath it to make you even more sort of hyped up and crazy. So we need to find the ways both to pay enough attention that we know what's happening in the world, but not get overwhelmed by that kind of information overload, and to find sources of information that help us learn, but also feed us and give us hope that we can make a difference. Because ultimately, democracy is on all of our shoulders, not just elected leaders. And one of the problems we face is this idea that democracy is something that happens, once a year or once every 4 years with elections, right? It needs to be an ongoing practice, something that we engage in our daily lives in an ongoing way. We also need to be particularly thinking about who are the people that we know or who we don't know but are in our communities who are the most vulnerable. What can we do to protect them? What can we do as individuals? What can Plymouth do as an institution? What can Syracuse cultural workers or the Syracuse Peace Council do? And what can we get our local officials to do? What can we get the city of Syracuse to do, Onondaga County, New York State, so that these draconian policies directed at immigrants and refugees can be, limited the damage here in our community. And, there's so much that's put out at us that makes it seem like we're powerless. And I think we need to celebrate a small little victory that has already happened, which is one of the many people who was nominated to serve in Trump's cabinet who was completely unqualified was Matt Gaetz, the representative from Florida. And there was enough pressure, enough voices that were raised that he was compelled to withdraw from that. There's many, many others who similarly need to be opposed actively, right? We want, any incoming administration has the right to appoint people who support their policies. They don't have the right to appoint people who are incompetent and have no experience to fulfill the roles that they need to carry out. We also need to find ways to collectively resist both policies that we feel like violate democracy and violate our rights, right? Democracy isn't just we vote and then, okay, whatever they do, we have to accept that. No, it's an ongoing process. And we particularly need to be attentive to the kinds of things that seek to undermine the structures of democracy that can cause long-term damage. And one of them is very much upon us. Trump has talked a great deal about not going through the Senate for confirmation, but instead having these recess appointments, which is in essence saying that he wants the executive branch to have total control over who runs the government, when the Constitution is very much set up with this balance of powers and co-equal branches of government. And the Senate, part of their responsibility is to confirm or not confirm nominees to those positions. So anything that we can do to try and be sure that those processes are followed as much as possible is really important. We also need to reach across boundaries with compassion. Who here has people in your family or close in your life with whom you disagree deeply about some of these issues? So, not all of us, but quite a number of us. I don't know about you, but I have my wife and I have an ongoing text thread with one of our nephews who was a very strong supporter initially of RFK and then moved to Trump. And in those conversations, there are times where I just want to swear at him and scream, and there's been a number of times where I type something and then I don't send it right away, and I say, look at it in a half hour, and I understand not to send it. But to try and keep those lines of communication open, I think is really important, and it's very difficult work, right? Obviously, we have very strong beliefs and feelings about what's right and what is wrong. And in general, those other folks do as well. And I do believe at some fundamental levels, most people do care, right? Donald Trump seems to care a fair bit about his immediate family. And so it doesn't extend very far. So we need to keep those communications, those conversations going. And we need to build community, right? Here at places like Plymouth, in the community at large, I'll mention it here. I've had this idea that I've thrown out to a handful of people that has not caught on, that one of the things that is so missing, and I certainly hear this from my nephew, is that Syracuse is a remarkable, beautiful, diverse panoply of peoples from across the world. Lots of differences, and lots of problems too, right? We have one of the highest child poverty rates in the country, particularly among young people of color. So we don't want to look at this through rose-colored glasses and pretend everything's okay. But people largely are able to get along, to work together, to go to school together, to shop together, to work together. So I think that one of the things that we could do that would be really useful would be to celebrate that, right? And sometime as this year ends or early next year to have a large community celebration, primarily not filled with speeches and words, but with culture, with artists and musicians and dancers and poets who can share from their traditions and help people to see that we're enriched by the people who come here from all over the world. And that's true whether they have come through official channels or whether they've snuck across a border because they see no way that they can find safety without engaging in a practice which is very dangerous to them particularly. So, and one of the people in my community who I look to and has given me great solace and things to think about is my friend Allie Wayne, who some of you may know. Allie has been here in the Syracuse community for a little over 20 years. He's initially from Senegal, came here with his mother, who is a diplomat, working for the United Nations through a variety of tragic situations. She was killed in Africa when she was working back there. And as a result of that and the grief that Ali experienced when he was a college student that prevented him from completing college at that point, he lost his legal status here. So he's been an undocumented person here in our community for over 20 years and has spoken out regularly about that. So he posted this on Facebook a couple of weeks ago. There is something about having been undocumented most of my adult life that situates me well to understand these next 4 years. Those of us who have had to navigate this identity have unfairly gotten used to precarity as a frame of mind and material reality. This is obviously not a good thing, but it builds resilience. One of the things that saddens me about what's coming is that more people I care for are entering that circle of precarity. But we are not lost. There are lessons in survival buried here. Lessons in knowing that the institutions that most USers rely on are inherently fragile and cannot be counted on to save anyone. Lessons in mutual aid and resistance. Lessons in knowing that the state cannot confer humanity upon you. It has no moral legitimacy to do so. We have value because we exist, and the practice of asserting this, despite societal pressure, does create a form of character that stays with you. This is an old story. No matter the myths we are taught, this country has never been a meritocracy. It has always catered to a very small group of wealthy, straight white men. Part of the story of this crisis is that this elite is now on the ropes and is lashing out at as many groups as possible: women, queer folks, indigenous people, immigrants, etc. This is a brutal reactionary moment, but anyone who understands the ebbs and flows of history knows that it is pregnant with future possibilities that can be worked on even in the midst of this emergency. Think of the next 4 years as a laboratory of possibility. We will not win all the fights. Hell, we might not win many. People will be harmed. There is no way around this. But this is the time of small, experimental interventions within a crumbling system. This is when we create liberatory spaces within the hard shell of an ailing empire. Take it from those of us who have been resisting from the bottom for many years. We are not powerless in the face of this. I encourage you to find 1 or 2 things that you are passionate about and focus on them. Don't spread yourself out too thin. There is too much work and there are too many fires burning. Focus on where you can be effective and trust that others will focus on the pieces you can't get to. You will not be able to fix everything, but you will be able to make a difference in a few lives, and that is enough. I'm not sure if I could, don't let them get you down. He actually said so, but not, I want to be respectful in the church. So one of the things that that feeds me is deeply rooted in this land that we're on, this part of the world that we call Central New York, which is the gratitudes and giving thanks that I have learned from our Haudenosaunee neighbors, particularly people at the Onondaga Nation, on whose territory we gather at this moment, unceded territory, which was taken illegally from them. So they teach us that gratitude should be a daily practice, right? In our culture, a major holiday is coming up later this week that we particularly lift up giving thanks and appreciating the bounty of the earth. But the Haudenosaunee teach us that we should give thanks on a daily basis to all the elements of creation that support our life, from the ground beneath our feet, all the worms and the life within the soil that ultimately feeds us, the air that we breathe, the plants and animals which provide for us in so many ways, the trees which provide wood for us to build homes, to heat us for those of us who use firewood, all the different elements of creation, including the people. So I encourage you to embrace that gratitude. And for any who are interested, neighbors of the Onondaga Nation that Esther mentioned, which is a project of the Syracuse Peace Council and works in solidarity with the Onondaga Nation, working together for justice, for a sustainable future for all peoples. We have a practice of gathering out at Willow Bay on the north end of Onondaga Lake on Thanksgiving morning at 10 a.m. And we just gather in a circle and go around the circle, and everyone has an opportunity to share a little bit about something that we're thankful for at that moment. And I know for some folks who are in the kitchen all day up until when the table is set, that it's not possible, but others of you may be able to sneak out for an hour or so to join us. So would welcome you for that. So I want to close by reading one of my favorite poems. It's called The Low Road by Marge Piercy, and so apologies for the commercial piece here, but it is available as a accordion poster, as is a piece next to it on the table called Greetings and Thanks, which is a kind of a graphic summary of the Haudenosaunee giving of thanks for all the elements of creation. So this poem, it's by Marge Piercy, who's a poet and activist who's lived on Cape Cod for many, many years, grew up in a working class Jewish family in Detroit. Now, it was written in the late 70s, sort of in some ways, and it harkens back a bit to the Vietnam era and the resistance to that war and the other struggles related to it. The Low Road. What can they do to you? Whatever they want. They can set you up. They can bust you. They can break your fingers. They can burn your brain with electricity. Blur you with drugs till you can't walk, can't remember. They can take your child, wall up your lover. They can do anything you can't stop them from doing. How can you stop them? Alone you can fight, you can refuse, you can take what revenge you can, but they roll over you. But two people fighting back to back can cut through a mob. A snake dancing file can break a cordon. An army can meet an army. Two people can keep each other sane, can give support, conviction, love, massage, hope, sex. Three people are a delegation, a committee, a wedge. With four, you can play bridge and start an organization. With six, you can rent a whole house, eat pie for dinner with no seconds, and hold a fundraising party. A dozen make a demonstration. 100 fill a hall. 1,000 have solidarity in your own newsletter, or now maybe website. 10,000 power in your own paper. 100,000 your own media. 10 million your own country. It goes one at a time. It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again after they said no. It starts when you say we and know who you mean, and each day you mean one more. Thank you. So happy to answer questions now or engage in conversation. And if you just want to say something, you don't have to try to pretend it's a question to say something. You can just say something.
When you were talking about being thankful, the one that came to my mind were the birds that drop the seeds. And the birds they're very quiet. They don't make, well, crows make a lot of noise, but other than them, they're very quiet. They go about their business. They eat from the bird feeders if it's full. They do what they do. They hide in the bushes in the winter to stay warm. But really what they do is drop the seeds. And we all need to drop seeds, and thank you for dropping yours.
Thank you. Very sweet. Other questions, comments?
Is this sort of like a weekly Sunday event thing with this church, or is this more like a unique weekend?
So I'm going to pass it on to Esther to answer that because I'm not a member of the church. But welcome. I'm glad sounds like you're not a regular here. So.
Hi, welcome. My name is Esther. I've been coming here for way too long, about 40-some years, raised my kids here. Yeah, this church has got a long history of peace and justice, and part of that peace and justice effort is to create dialogues and create information that people can respond to, so that's what the forum is. It's after church. It's not every Sunday these days, but it's at least once or twice a month, and you're always welcome.
Other questions or comments? Is that because people are feeling kind of depressed and hopeless, or?
I want to thank you for teaching us a way to get through the next 4 years, and I thought you had a really good points there. I would also second you got to turn off the news for your own sanity. Practice that. And unfortunately, last four, when the first time around, the local news, I thought I could watch that, but the national infiltrates into the local, so you got to turn off all news.
Yeah. So if people didn't hear, so and what's your name?
My name's Scott.
Scott Kramer talked about the need to turn off the news, and which obviously is something that's important to you and I also. And I'm in a family where my partner comes home, has a very intensive job, comes home and turns on MSNBC, and it's on often kind of all evening. And I want to spend time together with her, but it makes me completely crazy and hopeless. One of the important sources of information and news for me is an online program called Democracy Now!, which it's broadcast on radio and television in many, many communities around the country, but not here in Syracuse. But it's democracynow.org, and it's an hour-long daily program. And there's times when it can also be quite depressing, because there's a lot of depressing things happening in the world. There's a lot of frightening things. But you hear from grassroots people around the world who are engaged in efforts to make a difference. And for me, that's really important to give me hope and recognize that, we're doing work here in our community in Syracuse, but there's people just like us in churches and synagogues and mosques and community centers and schools in every community across this country who are similarly putting our heads together and figuring out what is it that we can do to make a difference. And one of the things that's interesting about our work at Cultural Workers is that people often would think, well, of course, our best customers must be in San Francisco and New York and Boston and Madison, Wisconsin and Ithaca, and these major urban centers, and we certainly have lots of customers in those places. But in some ways, we're most important to the people out in some small town in Idaho who feel like nobody gets them, and we're sort of a lifeline to these values, these humanistic values, these values of community and togetherness. So.
I know this is kind of a crumb, but one thing that's helped me just recently is that Trump didn't win by that much. And I think, they've been portraying it as a landslide. They would talk about it as a landslide, but almost 50% of the people in this country did not vote for him. So, that kind of helps me feel like there's other people, surrounding me that are not pushing this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's a really important point. And I was on a webinar with tens of thousands of people across the country. I think it was 2 weeks ago now. And we spent a fair amount of time talking about what were electoral victories as well, right? We now have a moderate Democrat representing us in Congress, when before we had a Republican who was completely out of touch with this community. New York State, Prop 1 passed, which needs to pass a second time for it to go into effect, but which provides greater rights to people and enshrines them in the Constitution, so they'll be harder to change. Abortion rights passed in 7 states, several of whom voted for Trump. There were minimum wage laws passed in states that, again, voted for Trump. So clearly some of the issue here is that Trump can come across to some people as being not very smart, but in some ways he's quite a genius at sort of hitting people at a real gut level, and particularly people who aren't paying as much attention to policies and that sort of detail of what it is that he plans to do. And unfortunately, the Democrats completely missed the mark. And I think some of it is, and this, right, it's not that the Republican leadership and the Trump and the people around him are in touch enough with people who are struggling economically in our communities that's how they understand it, and that's why they have communicated the way they have. But Kamala Harris's message that basically the economy is good and everything is fine, at a macro level, a bunch of that is true. And if you compare the recovery in the United States economically to other developed countries around the world after COVID, we're way ahead of other people. But that doesn't matter if you're struggling to pay your bills, and if you're worried that if your kid has to have their tonsils out, that you're going to have to go into debt and not get kicked out of your apartment because you can't afford the rent. So that level of economic insecurity is something we really need to address. So.
Yeah, ever since who will become president, I was gonna vote, but I've been reading the flyers. Wars, whoever her name is, they were up there saying a lot of people were putting her down, people were putting Trump down and stuff. All I wanted was just a president that will better the United States of America, have the United States people of America be able to have jobs, people that retire be able to live a normal life instead of going to garbage cans looking for cans to pay what is it called?
So,
Propane, not propane, but
natural gas?
not natural gas, what is it, for medicine?
Oh, yeah.
Not, but when you buy your medicine, you got to pay.
Copay.
What I'm just saying is, they said that if she became president, everything would change, nobody would be able to, do anything, everybody would do what, she wanted to do, what the government wanted to do. But I'm just saying, I was talking to people, and, I don't like to talk about Democrats or politics, I never voted at all. But again, like I said, it's just they had that thing down in the White House and stuff, and I'm telling people, it's okay, if somebody went down there and protested and stuff, said, okay, first of all, let me just say, I know I'm going too fast, but the people in the White House, it doesn't matter if you're single, married, or what. You got a group of people. It's like being in a jury. No, this is not right, this is wrong. Now, the group of people in there will say, okay, if you don't stick with us, we're gonna come after you, so I have no choice, you know what I'm saying? They're gonna come after me, but they have so much power to do what they wanna do, and plus there is a protest, you know? We have a right for freedom of speech too, you know? But everybody, like you said, everybody is afraid or scared of the consequences gonna happen, and it's like, it doesn't matter what age you are, you know? I mean, it's like, we're scared, you know? But hopefully the younger generation will help out too, you know? But I'm just saying, it's just all messed up. I mean, they can give a good presentation, just like when they had it with Obama. Mrs. Obama, she gave a big presentation, then Mr. Obama, her husband gave a good presentation, so, you know, but I mean, they're saying it was rigged that Trump, not Trump, but the other person.
Biden, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of kind of conflicting information and misinformation, and one of the big challenges for us is to research and to learn to think critically, and to be sure that our educational institutions help young people learn to think critically and not just accept what's thrown at them. And it's a much bigger topic that's not my area of expertise at all, but kind of the information atmosphere in our culture has changed a great deal. And that's very frightening for democracy, that people can continue to get just tons of information that's not true, and just be inundated with it in such a way that it becomes their reality. And others of us have total other sources of information, which isn't always correct as well. So,
It's like you
yeah.
said about the migrants and stuff, they're coming here, a lot of them are getting in illegally, and they're taking our jobs over there and get places for.
See, but that's where I think, and I'd encourage you to dig a little deeper on that, right? My understanding is that overwhelmingly migrants are taking jobs that are empty, that are being unfilled. You know, that whole thing in, what was the name of the town in Ohio that Trump cited about people, Springfield, Ohio, eating cats and dogs, right? The Haitian immigrants in that community were invited in because there were factories that could not hire people. They couldn't find workers. So they invited them into their community. The numbers of them were very high, and so that did shift the character of the community some. But it wasn't because they were taking other people's jobs or taking advantage. They wanted an opportunity to work hard. And overwhelmingly, that's my experience. People who come to this country, particularly people who are coming with just the clothing on their backs, you know, they're not doing that out of some sense of greed or wanting to take advantage. They're doing it because they're desperate. And, right, I'm a believer that all human beings, whether you got here through the front door or the back door, I have a responsibility to help be sure that you have food and clothing, a safe place to live, an opportunity to live in dignity. And so I think we need to ground ourselves in that.
So thank you, Andy. I wanted to the one hook that I hang my hope on is Trump is a lame duck, and we need to make sure he understands what that means. He will be out of power, and we need to make sure we replace him with somebody who's more just oriented. Thank you, Andy, very much.
My pleasure.
And I want you to know that the items that are on this back table and the brochure that you have that you'll take home and share with other people supports the work that Andy does, supports the work of the cultural workers. And without this income, maybe this won't happen. So we need to support them as best we can. It's a little piece of justice we can do.